You weren't pretending anymore. My heart skipped. He smiled. I've watched the way you look at her, and the way she looks at you. You can't fake that. I glanced toward Sarah, helping Lily into the car. Maybe he was right. Maybe somewhere between hospital visits, pizza nights, homework, movie marathons, and bedtime stories, the acting had quietly disappeared. A month later, the truth finally came out. Not because anyone exposed us, because Sarah couldn't lie to her father anymore. She confessed everything. The fake husband, the hospital, the promise, the beginning. George listened without interrupting. When she finished, he laughed. You really think I didn't know? Sarah stared. I knew from the second week. What? You were pretending. He smiled. Then one day, you stopped pretending. He looked at me. I've lived long enough to recognize real love. That Christmas, our tiny apartment overflowed with laughter. George carved the turkey. Lily insisted everyone wear paper crowns. Sarah looked happier than I'd ever seen. When midnight arrived, snow began falling outside. I asked Sarah to step onto the porch. She wrapped herself in a blanket. What is it? I reached into my coat, pulled out a small velvet box. Her eyes widened. This isn't pretending. I whispered. It never has been. I opened the ring. Sarah, the first time you asked me to pretend to be your husband, I jokingly asked if I got to kiss my wife. She smiled through tears. So, I was wondering, would you stop pretending and actually become my wife? She cried before answering, then laughed, then nodded. Yes. I kissed her beneath the falling snow, not because it was part of an act, not because anyone expected it, but because after every lonely year, every heartbreak, every unexpected twist, I had finally come home. Our wedding took place the following spring. It wasn't extravagant, just family, friends. George proudly walked Sarah down the aisle. Halfway there, he whispered loud enough for everyone to hear. This time, he's really your husband. Everyone laughed. Lily served as flower girl. Halfway through the ceremony, she suddenly shouted, Can I call him Daddy now? The guests burst into laughter. I looked at Sarah. She nodded while crying. I knelt beside Lily. You've been allowed to call me that for a long time. She threw her tiny arms around my neck. I love you, Daddy. Those 4 words were worth more than every paycheck I'd ever earned. Years passed. We bought a small house. The very first thing I built was a tree house for Lily. George spent afternoons teaching neighborhood children how to garden. Sarah opened a small bakery she'd dreamed about since childhood. Life wasn't perfect. Bills still arrived. Arguments still happened. There were difficult days. But love had changed the way we carried those burdens. We carried them together. Sometimes people asked how Sarah and I met. She always smiles before answering. I asked a complete stranger to pretend to be my husband. Then she points at me, and he asked the most ridiculous question imaginable. I finish the story every time. Do I get to kiss my wife? People laugh, but they never understand. That single sentence wasn't really about a kiss. It was about choosing hope over fear, choosing compassion over convenience, choosing to step into someone else's pain without knowing where it might lead. The greatest moments in life rarely arrive according to our plans. Sometimes they begin in hospital hallways. Sometimes they begin with strangers. Sometimes they begin with impossible requests. And sometimes the family you've been praying for is waiting just one act of kindness away. If this story teaches us anything, it's this: love isn't always found in perfect circumstances. Sometimes it grows from broken moments, difficult choices, and unexpected acts of compassion. The people who enter our lives by accident often become the ones we can't imagine living without. Never underestimate the power of showing kindness to someone carrying an invisible burden. One simple yes can change not only another person's future, but your own as well. Because the happiest endings are often born from the most unlikely beginnings. The entire hospital corridor fell silent. She stood there wearing a faded blue sweater, holding a little girl's hand while trying not to cry. I know this sounds crazy, she whispered, but would you pretend to be my husband? Just for today. Everyone nearby stared at her. The nurse looked confused. The doctor folded his arms. I looked into her frightened eyes, then glanced at the little girl hiding behind her. Instead of asking why, instead of saying no, a smile escaped before I could stop it. "Only one question," I replied. She blinked. "What is it?" I smiled wider. "If I'm pretending to be your husband, do I get to kiss my wife?" For the first time that day, she laughed through her tears. Neither of us knew that a joke made in a hospital hallway would completely change both our lives forever. My name is Daniel Carter. At 34, I had become an expert at living alone. Every morning looked exactly like the one before. Wake up, drink coffee, go to work, come home, eat frozen dinners, sleep, repeat. I worked as a carpenter, building beautiful homes that families filled with laughter, while I returned each night to an apartment that echoed with silence. 5 years earlier, I had been engaged. Emily, the woman I thought would become my wife. 2 months before our wedding, she admitted she had fallen in love with someone else. She apologized. She cried. She left. Ever since then, I convinced myself that love simply wasn't meant for me. Life was easier without expectations. Or at least that's what I kept telling myself. That rainy Tuesday afternoon, I stopped by St. Mary's Hospital to deliver custom wooden cabinets for the pediatric reading room. The job took less than an hour. I was heading toward the exit when I heard someone crying. Not loud, not dramatic. The quiet kind of crying that comes after you've already run out of strength. I turned. A young woman sat on one of the hallway chairs. Her blonde hair was tied into a messy ponytail. Dark circles surrounded exhausted green eyes. Beside her sat a little girl, hugging a stuffed rabbit whose ears had nearly fallen off. The child couldn't have been older than 6. The woman stood when she noticed me looking. "I'm sorry." I nodded politely. She hesitated. Then, almost as if she had nothing left to lose, she walked toward me. "Can I ask you something completely insane?" I laughed softly. Those are usually the interesting questions. She swallowed. "My father is upstairs." I waited. "He's dying." The words landed heavily. "He refuses treatment because he thinks I'm alone." I frowned. "He believes no man would ever stay with a single mother." She looked away. "He blames himself for everything." The little girl squeezed her mother's hand. "I promised him years ago that one day he'd meet my husband." She laughed bitterly. "There isn't one." Silence. Then she asked a question that changed everything. "Would you pretend to be him?" I should have refused. Any reasonable person would have. Instead, I looked at the little girl. She smiled shyly. Something inside me softened. Then came my ridiculous response. "If I'm pretending to be your husband," she stared, "do I get to kiss my wife?" For one beautiful second, she forgot to be afraid. She laughed. Even her daughter giggled. "My name's Sarah," she finally said, "and this little monkey is Lily." "Lily," I smiled. She waved. "Hi." 20 minutes later, I found myself standing beside Sarah in room 418. Her father, George, looked weak but alert. The oxygen tube rested beneath his nose. When Sarah entered, holding my hand, his tired face lit up brighter than the afternoon sun. "You came." Sarah nodded while fighting tears. "Dad, I'd like you to meet Daniel." "My husband." Those words echoed strangely in my heart. George reached toward me. His grip was surprisingly strong. "Take care, my girls." I answered without thinking. "I will." Something about those words felt different, like a promise instead of a lie. George smiled peacefully for the first time according to the nurses. That evening he finally agreed to continue treatment, not because he suddenly believed he would live forever, but because hope had returned. Hope that his daughter wasn't facing life alone. Over the next week, Sarah called several times. At first, it was simply to visit George. The doctors kept asking about her husband. The nurses adored us. Eventually, pretending became strangely comfortable. We learned each other's favorite foods, favorite movies, favorite childhood memories. Lily quickly decided I was the funniest grown-up alive, mostly because I made terrible dinosaur impressions. One afternoon, While coloring together, she asked, "Are you really my daddy now?" Sarah froze. "So, did I?" I knelt beside Lily. "I don't know." She thought carefully. "I hope so." Children rarely realize how deeply simple words can cut or heal. As George slowly improved, our fake marriage should have ended. Instead, Sarah invited me for dinner, then another. Then Lily begged me to attend her school play. Soon I was fixing broken shelves in their apartment, teaching Lily how to build birdhouses, helping Sarah carry groceries. Life quietly began weaving us together. One evening after Lily had gone to bed, Sarah and I sat on the apartment balcony. "You've done more for us than anyone ever has." I shook my head. "You gave me something too." "What?" "A reason to come home." She looked at me for a long time. Neither of us spoke, because sometimes silence says exactly what words cannot. Weeks passed. George recovered enough to leave the hospital. The day he was discharged, he hugged me tightly. "I know." I blinked. "Know what?"